Everyone, welcome to another Overrated Film Saturday. Apologize I had to delay this video. Unfortunately, I was pretty busy over the weekend, but I should be caught up by the end of today, as of Sunday. So without further ado, for this particular video, I thought it'd be interesting to address The Blind Side as a overrated film. This one came out, I believe, relatively recently. I think within the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. And it's one that I think has received a lot of recognition uh, since its sort of release, but I don't really necessarily think it's all that that it's kind of cracked up to be. So I'm gonna kind of go over my reasoning behind this. Now, although this film is supposedly supposed to be about um, a homeless man who eventually becomes sort of a football player, it ends up being more of Sandra Bullock's story of getting the homeless man to become a football player. Um, and this is where we get kind of into the sort of cliche aspects of the film. Um, and I don't necessarily think Sarah Bullock is a bad actress uh, or doesn't have any talent or potential, but I think she has a tendency to pick roles that, again, they don't really display a significant amount of range. They're just kind of just these roles that she sort of sticks to, and although she is good at them, at least sometimes, um, she's not really one of the actresses that I think really does stick out as far as someone who's really doing a full-blown transitioning of different characters. I think she just kind of sticks to her sort of brand of what she's good at and just kind of goes from there, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, when you're seeing sort of the same characters over and over again, especially when you see sort of her character within this film, it just kind of gets a little bit redundant, and you almost think that she really doesn't deserve the recognition for uh, doing similar beats over and over again. But and I think the thing too is the film, at least for me, did feel very like a lot of other Sandra Bullock films, where it's like she's this very sassy woman, and in this case, she's a pretty wealthy and well-to-do woman who is very kind of achievement and career oriented, who, you know, takes on sort of the leadership role. And again, this is pretty much a lot of her films. Her films really do focus in on her being kind of that character. Um, and what I think really does bother me, at least within this film, is not only does it have this sort of kind of cliche, formulaic things that you see time and time again, but it kind of tries to play in with the whole idea of race and whatnot. Um, and to be honest, I think, again, these kinds of themes and whatnot are very redundant, and they don't provide anything new to the table. And it gets kind of annoying to sit through and sort of kind of see these kinds of things explored over and over and over again, and really just doing it for the sake of just trying to be heartwarming and trying to be, cheesy, and there's no genuineness to it anymore. And I think this is what the film primarily lacks. Um, and I think it could have been constructed a whole lot better, because it is supposed to be based off of a true story of this guy who ends up becoming a football player. And the ironic thing is the guy that's it's supposed to be based off of, the actual guy, didn't really particularly care for this film. And I can kind of understand why that is. And I think the fact that we've seen these kinds of beats being played in over and over again, and the idea of trying to make something very Hollywood-esque, and the heartwarming cheese that you see over and over again, that again, it doesn't have any genuineness to it. See, there's that's the problem with, I think, this film. Um, it's not like Forrest Gump, where there is sort of this genuine heartwarming and emotional feeling that you get from watching it. It's not like that. With here, it just feels so just kind of formulaic and just uh, constructed in a way to make you want to like it, as opposed to trying to have come off with a sense of genuineness and actually expanding upon things. And here it's again, it just takes everything and doesn't really bring anything new to the table, and just sort of puts everything as these very like simply constructed uh, formulas that again are really heavily emphasized with a lot of these types of films. And there have been films that have been explored about this time and time again, about someone who is sort of down on their luck and may or may not be experiencing some kind of ism or whatnot, or discrimination, and we see them rise to the top. And it's the story that's been done and done time and time and time again. And I think just that is something that's again not it's just nothing new, and it's not doing it in a way to suggest that it's trying to put anything new out there as far as talking about these kinds of issues. And again, it's just one of those things where I just kind of have to say to myself, okay, there is just a point where these films do feel like they're not taking a genuinely true story. They're just kind of Hollywooding the true story. And I don't mind creative licensing. Again, I don't think that's really a bad thing. But I think when you're taking kind of the parts and bits of the story that sort of make it somewhat, more marketable and done to death, and instead of focusing on things that were actually unique to that particular true story, then you sort of lose the potential of the film to be anything more than just something that's just light fluff. And I think this is what this film sort of does. And unfortunately, I think it's what makes it not as enjoyable, and therefore I don't think as memorable. And I think from my understanding, as far as the criticism that was received from the actual guy who this film is based off of, I think he claimed that there was more so focus on the background, more so of what was going on, because what ends up happening is Sandra Bullock's character takes in the homeless guy and under her wing. In other words, she gives him a place to live, like I believe it's at her place, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think he even goes to school at one point. So again, it's addressing all of these behind the scenes stuff. And although obviously we do see him play the game football, it's trying to bring up all of these things that that are sort of more behind the scenes and not necessarily a part of really the game itself, or the importance of the game, really. And I guess that's really what I think he was trying to say as far as his criticism of it. And I can see that too. Again, they're trying to do the heartwarming, cheesy type stuff and not really do anything that has really any meat to it. And again, I think this is where, it just falls into being more fluff. And I think that's the problem with a lot of Sandra Bullock films. They're really fluff. They come and they try to do something a little bit heartwarming or cute or cheesy, and then you end up leaving and don't even really remember too much about it. And I think this is what this film sort of did. And I think apparently it won, or it was nominated for Best Picture and some other awards, I think. So it did get some recognition from the industry and whatnot. But I think honestly, it really wasn't one that was trying to do anything really all too all too interesting, and I think that's why I was kind of disengaged throughout. But that's just my honest opinion of the film. I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say, but I think that's really ultimately all I can talk about when it comes to my reasoning behind why I think this film's overrated. And again, I don't think it's horrible by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think it's anything that is worthy of a huge amount of praise. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. Hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye bye.